Welcome. Today, we are diving into the incredible work of Donella Meadows. We're going to explore a completely different way of thinking that honestly can help us make sense of our super interconnected world and maybe even start solving some of its most complex problems. So, let's just jump right in.
So have you ever asked yourself this? I mean, you come up with a perfectly logical step-by-step plan to fix something, maybe at work, in your town, or even just in your own life, and what happens? It either does nothing, or, way worse, it actually makes the problem bigger. You know what? That frustration is completely universal, and it comes from a basic mismatch in how we think the world works versus how it actually works.
See, most of us are taught to think in a straight line. A causes B. It's simple, it's direct, it feels nice and tidy. But reality? It's almost never that neat. Systems thinking asks us to see the world less like a chain and more like a web. It's not about a simple cause and effect. It's about this dynamic, interconnected network where, really, everything is influencing everything else all at once.
Okay, so if we're going to make that shift, we first have to get a handle on what a system even is. It's a word we throw around all the time, right? But what does it really truly mean? At its core, this is it. A bunch of interconnected parts working together for a purpose. Think about your own body for a second. It's a perfect system. You've got elements like organs and cells. They're all interconnected through nerves and blood vessels, and they're all organized for one main purpose: keeping you alive. But it's not just bodies, a city's traffic grid, your company, even your family. These are all systems.
Now this quote, this is where it gets really interesting. Meadows just nails it here. She's saying that knowing the individual parts of a system isn't nearly enough. The magic, the behavior, the surprises, it all comes from the and. It's the relationships, the connections between the parts. That's where the real story is. And so how do those interconnections actually work? Well, they operate through something called feedback loops. You can think of these as the invisible engines that are constantly running in the background, driving the behavior of every single system around us. And there are really two main kinds you need to know. First, you've got balancing loops. These are the stabilizers. They're always trying to keep the system at a certain level, seeking a balance. Then you have reinforcing loops. These guys are the amplifiers. They create runaway exponential change, either a virtuous cycle of growth or a vicious spiral of decline. So let's look at a super simple balancing loop we all get. A thermostat. The room gets too cold, right? The system notices and kicks on the heater. The room warms up, it hits that target temperature, and the system shuts the heater off. It's in this constant state of self-correction, always trying to maintain that balance. It's completely self-regulating. Now, a reinforcing loop. Population growth is the classic example here. More people lead to more births, which then leads to, well, even more people. You get this accelerating exponential growth. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. And the same dynamic can create an amazing culture of innovation at a company, or it can create a downward spiral of negativity. These loops just amplify whatever you feed them. Now, when all these loops and all these interconnections are working well together, systems can do some truly incredible things. I mean, almost magical things. These healthy systems have what you could almost call superpowers. They are resilient, they can self-organize, and they create synergy. Let's just quickly break down what each of those means. So resilience is just a system's ability to take a hit and bounce back. An ecosystem recovering after a huge wildfire is a perfect, powerful example of this. Self-organization is, to me, even more amazing. It's the ability to create new structures, new behaviors without any boss or central command telling it what to do. Think about a neighborhood just spontaneously organizing a massive cleanup after a storm. Nobody was in charge, the system just adapted. And finally, there's synergy. And it's basically this: 1 + 1 = 3. It's the idea that the whole is way greater than the sum of its parts. Think about a great sports team. You can have a bunch of individually skilled players, sure, but when they work together in a system, they create a level of performance that no single player could ever achieve alone. It's those interactions that create something totally new. But, and there's always a but, right? For all their incredible power, systems are also notoriously unpredictable. They don't always behave the way our linear A to B brains expect them to, and that leads to a lot of surprises. And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the problem. Our mental models are just too simple. We expect a simple, predictable response when we push on something. But we live in a world that's governed by these complex, non-linear forces, full of delays and feedback loops we can't even see. And this mismatch often leads systems into these really common patterns of dysfunction that Meadows called traps, like policy resistance. That's when different parts of a system end up working against each other, creating total gridlock. Or the drift to low performance, where our standards just slowly erode over time until what used to be unacceptable becomes a new normal. And then there's the famous tragedy of the commons, where a shared resource, like a community fishing pond, gets totally depleted because everyone acts in their own self-interest.
Now, identifying these traps isn't about getting depressed about it. Not at all. In fact, it's the very first step toward finding a real solution. The key isn't to just push harder against the problem, but to find the right place to push.
Archimedes wasn't talking about systems, of course, but he totally captured this idea of leverage. A leverage point is a place in a complex system where one small, tiny shift can produce huge changes in the whole system's behavior. The real secret is finding that place to stand.
And here is the crucial insight. Not all interventions are created equal. As you can see here, just tweaking numbers, fiddling with parameters, has a really low impact. Changing the rules of the system? Okay, that has a bit more power. But the highest leverage point of all, the place where you can get the most change for the least effort, it's shifting the paradigm, the whole mindset, the shared belief system out of which the entire system is born. Let's make this really concrete. Think about an education system. A low-leverage intervention would be something like adjusting the student-teacher ratio by 1 or 2 kids. It might help a tiny bit, but it's not a game changer. Now, a high-leverage intervention, that would be changing the entire goal of the system, shifting the focus from maximizing standardized test scores to fostering genuine curiosity and critical thinking. That one shift in the goal changes absolutely everything else down the line.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? It's a really profound shift in how we see our role in the world. The goal of systems thinking isn't to become some master puppeteer who can control every little piece. That's impossible. Instead, the goal is to become a skilled dancer. It's about learning to observe the system, to feel its rhythms, and to move with it gracefully and effectively. It is about harmony, not control.
And that really just leaves us with a final thought. Whether it's your team at work, your local community, or even just your own personal habits, these are all systems, each with their own unique rhythms and rules. So the question to take away is this: what system in your life will you stop trying to control and start learning to dance with?